Good evening. I'd like to welcome you to the Illinois Senate District 25 Candidate Forum hosted by the League of Women Voters of the Elgin area. My name is Carol Grom and I will be the moderator tonight. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan organization that strives to empower voters and encourage informed participation in our democracy. One of the ways we do that is to hold candidate forums to provide voters an opportunity to hear the candidates running for election. The forums sponsored by the League give candidates for local offices a chance to present information about themselves and their candidacy. Background, skills, education, reasons for running for office, what they hope to accomplish if elected, and positions on various issues relevant to the office. Tonight's forum will not be a debate. It is intended to be an educational forum where you can learn about the candidates and hear about some of the issues pertinent to these elected offices and to the voters. All the candidates in contested races were invited to participate in a forum. Each one was given the opportunity to fill out a candidate questionnaire, and their written responses, if any, can be found in the voter guide. This evening, you will have a chance to hear from Democratic candidate Karina and Republican candidate Jeanette Ward. The format for today's forum will be a 3-minute opening statement, followed by 2-minute responses to written questions from the moderator, and ending with 2-minute closing statements. Our timekeeper will show the candidates when they have 1 minute left, 30 seconds left, and when their time is up. Questions for the candidates were selected from those submitted by League members. After the question and answer period, the candidates will have the opportunity to give a 2-minute closing statement beginning in reverse order. This forum will be streamed to our Facebook page, and the recorded forum will then be available for later viewing on our Facebook page and on the League website, LWVEA.org, until after the election on November 3rd. I'd like to welcome our candidates and thank you for agreeing to participate tonight. Ms. Villa, we will begin with your 3-minute opening statement.
Thank you so much, Carol, and thank you to the League of Women Voters from Elgin. Happy 100th birthday to the League. What a wonderful and momentous opportunity to be able to celebrate this year with all of you, especially in a forum like today. So the reason I decided to run, I was born and raised in West Chicago and was part of my parents' small business, worked with them from the time I was 13 to the time I was 25. I saw there firsthand the needs of the community. It was a wonderful experience getting to know West Chicago and the people of this town. From there, I ended up becoming a school social worker and worked right here in town and basically ran for office because I got to a point where I felt like there was so many concerns happening in our state. Everything from the cost of healthcare, access to mental health services, and overall, the cost of living for middle-class families. So I heard these complaints day in and day out from the families that I worked with. And I got to a point where I said, I'm done complaining and I'm going to try to be part of the solution. I have a track record as a state representative of reaching across the aisle, of bringing people together, of watching out for those who are most in need, especially during the time of COVID. I have a track record of having passed legislation to help those who needed it the most, who were our essential workers, who were not being protected from their employers. Other things that I made sure to do was bring resources such as food, over 100,000 pounds of food that was donated to the families who really needed it the most during this time, as well as bringing a testing center to West Chicago. All of these things were done through all of the relationships that I had built throughout my time as a state representative. During COVID, people reached out to me on a regular basis, reached out to our state office, and we were there for them. It didn't matter what side of the aisle they were on. We were there for every one of our constituents. Those were things that I want to make sure that I continue into this new role as a state senator. I am running for office because I want to continue all of the great work, all of the great initiatives that we started at my state office as the new state senator for the 25th district. My name is Karina LWVEA. Thank you so much for having us here this evening, and I look forward to the rest of the questions.
Thank you, Ms. Via. Ms. Ward, your 3-minute opening statement, please.
Yes, I'd also like to thank the League of Women Voters for hosting this forum. Thank you for doing that. It's a great service to the voters. I'm Jeanette Ward, and I'm running for Illinois Senate District 25 to protect freedom, faith, and family. It's hard to have freedom in Illinois when taxes and corruption are crushing our residents, and corruption is really a stealth tax. In light of recent revelations that ComEd admitted to bribing public official A, who is the Speaker of the House of Representatives, and agreed to pay a $200 million fine, term limits is beyond overdue in Illinois, and it's something I heartily support. Madigan has been in power a record 35 years. He's been in office since 1971, which is 2 years before I was born. My opponent took $1.4 million in campaign contributions from him and committees controlled by him, and said that she's not prepared to talk about it when asked by the press. This kind of scandal costs you, the taxpayer, in higher electric rates and no-show jobs for Democrat Party operatives. We need swifter sentences and longer sentences for those involved in this kind of thing. We also need fair maps where you, the people, get to choose your legislators and not the other way around. And the speaker should not also be his party's chairman. The Illinois governor has been hostile to faith communities in Illinois. The governor was outside of his authority as of April 7th. Churches should not have been forced to close while abortion clinics, marijuana dispensaries, and grocery stores remained open. The people's legislature should have convened to talk about those things and represent their people. Finally, our families are being crushed by taxes. Illinois has one of the highest outmigration rates because it has one of the highest overall tax rates in the country. We have some greater than 20 new taxes since last summer. We need to promote a culture of life in Illinois. My opponent was a co-sponsor on the most radical abortion law in America, and it allows abortion up to and including the moment of birth paid for by taxpayers. Even abortion supporters think that that's too radical. Finally, protecting families means defending and not defunding the police. I will always vote to give police the resources they need to do their job. I'm Jeanette Ward, and I'm running to protect freedom, faith, and family in Illinois' 25th Senate District.
Thank you, Ms. Ward. Now we were going to begin the question and answer portion of the forum with a reminder that each candidate will have 2 minutes to answer. The first question goes to you, Ms. Via. A recent Truth in Accounting study of states' financial health gave Illinois an F and a ranking of 49 out of the 50 states, with some $28.5 billion to pay $254.5 billion in bills. Why is Illinois in the bottom of the rankings, and what can be done to turn things around?
This is actually one of the reasons that I decided to run for office, because I felt the impact directly on my students on a regular basis when we didn't have a budget under the previous administration. Things were cut, such as mental health services, DCFS funding, healthcare overall was cut here in the state. And those that were the most vulnerable were the ones who were feeling the most impacted. When you think about the way that the state historically has been funding education, it has put the burden on the shoulders of property taxpayers. So what has happened is that some school districts are very overfunded and others are severely underfunded. What we need to make sure to do in the state, so under the previous administration, we did get a new equitable funding formula. We need to make sure that we continue to put funding into the schools who need it the most. Eventually, once those schools get to equity, then their local school boards can make the decision as to whether or not they want to maintain a levy or continuously increase levies year after year, like all school districts actually do here in the state of Illinois. So I believe that a lot of historic mismanagement of funds has led to having us to where we're at today. I proved as a state representative that I went to Springfield to get the job done, which is why I was very proud to help pass historic legislation in order to consolidate the police and fire pensions, something that they'd been working on trying to do for over 40 years. And as a freshman, we got it done.
Thank you. Ms. Ward, same question about the state's financial health. Why is Illinois in the bottom of the rankings, and what can be done to turn things around?
Well, first of all, the Illinois Constitution requires a balanced budget, and lawmakers have not been obeying the Constitution for as long as I can remember. Pension reform is the #1 fiscal necessity since it consumes a quarter of the budget in Illinois, and I want to make sure that the promises we made to those pension holders are kept. We have anywhere from $137 billion to $250 billion, depending on the rating agency, in unfunded pension liability. So we need to keep the promises to those who are near retirement age, but we need to change to a defined benefit system. We need to change to a defined contribution system from a defined benefit system and ensure that double and triple dipping is ended, because that's currently happening. And that's going to require an amendment to the Illinois Constitution. Like I said, I want to make sure that those who are promised pensions receive them. So if it is possible for Illinois and other states to encourage small businesses in the private sector to assist their employees to begin saving for retirement, it's plausible that similar programs could be implemented for government employees. It's the only way that I see that we can begin to pull our state back from the brink of financial insolvency. Finally, we need to reduce taxes overall, which will increase revenue. It's counterintuitive, but reducing taxes will allow more people and businesses to be able to live here and to pay the taxes that are levied. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ward. This next question goes to you first, and I think you've probably already partly answered it, but the question is, the pension crisis is or should be a top priority in Springfield now. State pensions and related costs now eat up 25% of annual general revenues, squeezing out other important priorities. Any additional funds that may be directed at the $144 billion and growing unfunded pension liability are unlikely to fix the problems without pension reform. One suggested fix is a constitutional amendment that protects already earned benefits but allows for adjustments in future unaccrued benefits that would allow Illinois to cut costs, stabilize the pension funds, and gradually eliminate the debt. Would you support such a constitutional amendment, and why or why not?
So I've already given some comments regarding pension reform, and yes, I would support an amendment to the Constitution with the caveat that we keep the promises that we've made to retirees who are already receiving pensions, as long as they're not double and triple dipping. I mean, that's kind of an unfair practice. I'd like to add to that I myself, if I win election, I will not take the state's pension. I am working full-time while I'm campaigning, and my company has agreed to allow me to work 50% if I'm elected, and therefore I don't plan to take the state's pension or the healthcare coverage for that matter. I am running because I love this place that I call my home, Illinois, and not to enrich myself.
Thank you. Ms. Villa, same question. Would you support such a constitutional amendment, and why or why not?
So this problem is a massive one, as you've already identified, and we need to make sure that we don't continue to kick the can down the road like our predecessors have done. I think that it's very critical that there's to understand that there's not one solution. We need to bring key stakeholders to the table, just like we did when we passed the police and fire pension reform bill. We have to make sure that all sides are considered. Right now, during this COVID pandemic, our state is going to be in even more dire straits. When we talk about the possibility of switching the Constitution in order to have new people coming in have a different trajectory than the rest, those new members coming in to the field, right, whichever field you're talking about, which receives a pension, their dues, their money, their payment into the pension is what actually is paying for those people who are retired. So we need to make sure that we don't just say, let's have this quick fix, because sometimes quick fixes have unintended consequences, which then later on are only going to lead to compounded problems. So I am for comprehensive solutions that include both sides of the aisle with experts at the table, and make sure that we're doing this in a bipartisan way, just like we did that police and fire pension reform. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Villa. This next question will go to you first. The Fair Maps Amendment, a bipartisan effort to make the redistricting process more transparent and less politically motivated, sought to change the current mystifying jigsaw puzzle of legislative boundary lines that supports the interests of politicians over the interests of voters. But the attempt to place a referendum on the ballot to create a nonpartisan commission to redraw the districts after the 2020 census failed again, lacking any real support from the governor and legislative leaders. Do you support changing the redistricting process to create an independent commission tasked with redrawing the districts?
Historically, when we talk about fair maps, we talk about maps that represent people of color, specifically people from the Black community, people from the Latino community. These are communities that have been historically divided in order for politicians to be able to split up their voices, split up their votes. I think that what is critical when talking about fair maps is making sure that both the Black and Brown communities have a seat at the table, that someone from the Black or Brown caucus, Black or Latino caucus, are sponsoring the legislation. I think this is critical because this conversation comes about from a long history of dividing communities of color. And so I would be absolutely for a piece of legislation that the Latino caucus or the Black caucus was standing up and saying, this is a great piece of legislation. I think that's really critical. Out by me, my map is a Republican map. My map has been historically Republican. My district, not only my state rep district, but also my state Senate district. I have always been represented at the state level. I've always been represented by Republicans. So, my district is very different. It's very unique. And I think that it's just really critical, like I said in the previous answer, to have key stakeholders at the table.
Thank you. Ms. Ward, same question. Do you support creating an independent commission tasked with redrawing the districts?
Absolutely. As I mentioned in my opening statement, I heartily support fair maps because the people, the people, should get to choose your legislators and not the other way around. So we need to maintain the integrity of communities and not split them between different legislators. We need the districts to be compact and contiguous, and they're anything but that now. If you look at the maps of the districts, you can clearly see that they're gerrymandered, and we need to take the decision out of the hands of politicians, as was suggested in the question, and put it in the hands of a commission like in California. Our districts as currently drawn aren't competitive. We have supermajority rule in Illinois, and it's been that way for quite a while. So thank you for the question.
Thank you. This next question will go first to you, Ms. Ward. The referendum on the November ballot to amend the Illinois Constitution to allow a graduated income tax, the fair tax, instead of the current flat tax, is being promoted as a way to increase revenues while only increasing taxes on the top 3% of earners. Do you support the referendum, and why or why not?
I do not support this idea. The fair tax, as it's called, is anything but fair, and it gives the legislature a blank check to raise taxes on families who are already leaving Illinois in record numbers. Illinois doesn't have a revenue problem. Illinois has a spending problem. I will be voting no personally on this so-called tax or progressive tax. It will aggressively attack our wallets and hurt our economy. Even the Democrat state treasurer said that it opens the door to the ability to tax retirement income, and that's a terrible idea, which I strongly oppose. It's a double tax on our seniors who can't afford it and don't deserve it. A flat tax like we currently have is equally applied to everyone. That is fair. By heavily taxing those who are successful, the result is chasing even more taxpayers, businesses, and job creators out of Illinois. And that will result in lower tax revenue. And it will hurt the people who need good jobs and benefits to support their families. So no, I don't support it.
Thank you. Ms. Villa, same question. Do you support the referendum, and why or why not?
So to start, I want to make sure to make it clear that in no way would I be looking to tax retirement. That this right now, these times right now, especially during COVID, those people who are on fixed incomes are struggling greatly. And so I want to start off by that. I did vote to pass the fair tax. I actually believe I was a co-sponsor to it. I believe that the people in my district are going to do the research, and they're going to make sure that they vote in a way that is right for them. But I will tell you that 97% of the residents of Kane County will receive no tax increase with the fair tax. They will either see no increase, so it'll stay the same, or it'll drop. Right now, families are making decisions of whether or not they should pay for their child's medication or whether they should pay for their electric bill. Those things are the reality of hardworking people that live in my district, people who are working 2 jobs just to make ends meet. I think that it would be a travesty not to try to do something to alleviate these worries that some of these people who are working so hard day in and day out to provide for their families are encountering, especially right now during this COVID pandemic.
Thank you. Ms. Villa, this next question goes to you. In the wake of repeated corruption probes and criminal charges within the Illinois General Assembly and government agencies, a group of Democratic lawmakers has issued a series of ethics proposals dealing with leadership term limits, restrictions on lobbying, and creation of a process for removal of members from leadership positions if charged in criminal investigations. They are similar to proposals made last year by Republicans. Why hasn't the issue of comprehensive ethics reform ever advanced beyond talking points? Would you be willing to vote against your party's leaders if necessary to ensure that reforms actually happen instead of just being promised?
So I want to start off by saying that first and foremost, I'm a social worker. I have been a social worker for over 15 years. My ethical practice is based on the ethical guidelines of a social worker. So that is first and foremost. I do believe in term limits, especially in leadership, which is, in the Senate, that's something that already happens. In regards to lobbying reform, I absolutely see it. I see a need for it. This revolving door from being a elected official and the next year being a lobbyist for a big company, I think that needs to stop. I believe there needs to be between 3 to 5 years between someone who has been elected to office to the time that they can become a lobbyist. So I would vote absolutely against party leadership. I've done it before. I, stand up for what the community's needs and desires are. So I would absolutely vote for reform such as this.
Thank you. Ms. Ward, same question. Why does ethics reform never actually get beyond talking? And would you be willing to vote against your party's leaders if necessary to ensure that reforms actually happen instead of just being promised?
Yes, in answer to that question, that's a simple yes. I would be willing to vote against my party's leaders. And in answer to the question, why hasn't it ever advanced? It's because obviously from recent revelations, stuff has been going on, right? ComEd admitted to bribing public official A, who is the Speaker of the House of Representatives, and agreed to pay a $200 million fine. As I mentioned in my opener, Karina LWVEA accepted $1.4 million in campaign contributions from Michael Madigan, and she voted for him as leadership as a legislator. So I find it incredible that she says that she supports ethics reform. So the kind of ethics reform that I believe needs to be implemented are legislators shouldn't be lobbying their co-legislators. They shouldn't be voting in areas where they have a conflict of interests. The Inspector General should be able to open an investigation without asking the permission of the legislature. And the state party's chairman shouldn't also serve as the Speaker of the House of Representatives. Those are some basic reforms that need to happen in Illinois. Illinois residents are tired of being called one of, if not the most corrupt state in the nation. And this has to stop.
Thank you. Ms. Ward, despite recent increases in higher education funding, rising tuition, and the resulting increase in student loan debt has left many students with the difficult decision to go out of state to attend college, to skip college altogether, or to start their adult lives with a crushing debt. What more can the state of Illinois do to make higher education in Illinois more affordable?
Well, in general, it's the same solution that I would suggest for undergraduate education, and that is make it more competitive. Competition brings down costs. If you take so much government involvement out of it, that will increase competition and bring down the cost. Also, one way to get young people to stay here is to reduce taxes. You know, people want to leave Illinois because it has one of the highest overall tax rates in the country. That's why young people, old people, many people are leaving Illinois. I love Illinois. Illinois is my home, and I want it to be the kind of economic powerhouse that it could be.
Thank you. Ms. Via, same question.
So one of the things that I think is really critical is that we need to make sure that we are providing our students in high school with a variety of opportunities. So one of the things that in my district, so in my 49th House district, I have over 350 manufacturers. Every time that I go and talk to them, they talk to me about great paying jobs that they have available, and it's impossible for them to fill them. These jobs include being electricians, plumbers, different things in the building trades. I think that's so critical that in high school, when those opportunities are available, that we make sure that juniors and seniors can take advantage of some of these trades and leave high school already with a trade in order to go right into the workforce. Manufacturers are begging me for workers on a consistent basis, and I think that this would be one of those solutions, because there has to be other options than just one track for students. Aside from that, I do believe that when we have our local universities, Illinois universities are some of the best universities in the country. We need to make sure that it's accessible for our students to be able to go to these colleges. So we need to make sure that there's available grants for them. We've actually expanded some grants in the last legislative cycle. And I just want to make sure that we're keeping and retaining our students, because our students, if they come to school in Illinois, if they come to school in Chicago, they get their internships here and they stay here. They find jobs and they end up raising families, because Illinois is a wonderful place to live.
Thank you. Ms. Villa, a legislative panel has proposed expanding the state sales tax to cover some services as a way to help fund public schools. Would you support taxing some services to increase state revenues? And what other ideas might you offer for raising additional revenues for the state of Illinois?
I am really anxious to see what happens with the fair tax amendment, because with that, if we were to pass that, we would be able to have more revenue. I'm not looking to start increasing different taxes. I'm thinking that you're talking about maybe, nail salons or hair salons, these kinds of revenues. Those small businesses were crushed during COVID. I don't think that implementing new taxes for these industries makes sense right now. I think that we need to do step by step, and the first step would be, let's wait and see what happens with the fair tax amendment.
Thank you. Ms. Ward, same question, please.
Yes, I don't support increasing taxes of any kind. As I have said previously, Illinois doesn't have a revenue problem, it has a spending problem. That's why we have one of the highest out-migration rates in the country, because we have one of the highest overall tax rates. And it's obviously not working for Illinois. If we reduce taxes, we will increase revenue because more people will be able to stay here. Our schools are well funded if you compare with the rest of the country, the amount per student that we're spending.
Thank you. This next question goes to Ms. Ward first. Do you support term limits for Illinois legislature leadership positions or for state senators and representatives?
Absolutely. As I said in my opening statement, term limits is an idea that is beyond overdue in Illinois, especially in view of Speaker Madigan. He's been in power for 35 years. He was elected in 1971, 2 years before I was even born. I think 8 years, maximum 10 years ought to be a good amount to serve in any particular political office. Our founders intended for us to serve in political office and then go back to doing what we're doing before we were elected officials. And that's why I will keep my day job, which I am working full-time right now. They will allow me to work 50% with full benefits, and that's why I won't take the state's pension. I believe that I should be contributing to Illinois' the economic powerhouse that Illinois could be. And term limits is an idea that's beyond overdue in Illinois. And I hope to see it implemented if I'm elected senator.
Thank you. Ms. Villa.
As I stated previously, I do believe in term limits for leadership, and I believe that the legislative process, the election process is part of the term limits for the rest of us. So I do believe that voters have an opportunity every time there's an election to decide whether or not they want to keep the same person in office, but absolutely term limits for people in leadership.
Thank you. Ms. Villa, the next question goes first to you. On the subject of gun control, would you vote for stricter regulation of licensing and sales, including a ban on the manufacture, sale, and possession of assault weapons and universal background checks?
I was a co-sponsor and actually voted yes on Fix the Void. I hope that we have an opportunity once I am elected senator to do the same thing, to vote for that and get it passed to increase the safety for our communities.
Thank you. Ms. Ward, same question.
Please repeat the question.
On the subject of gun control, would you vote for stricter regulation of licensing and sales, including a ban on the manufacture, sale, and possession of assault weapons and universal background checks?
So I support the Second Amendment and in general, the God-given right of people to protect themselves. And I fully support the Second Amendment. I think families are in probably the best place to regulate members of their family who shouldn't be in possession of firearms. But again, that is a God-given natural right, the right to defend, the right to keep and bear arms, and it's protected in our Constitution because it's a right guaranteed by God. So no, I would not support that.
Thank you. Ms. Ward, is Illinois doing enough to protect the environment, including air and water quality? What changes, if any, would you like to see?
Well, I think, you know, if we really want to see green energy, that we should support fourth generation nuclear power. It's one of the best ways to produce clean energy. And that's an idea I would support as a legislator. I believe Illinois' environment is pretty clean, and I don't see a lot of reform that needs to be done there. I think that since our inception as a country, we have worked hard to clean up our environment, and Illinois included, and I'm proud of the progress that America and Illinois has made.
Thank you. Ms. Villa, same question. Is Illinois doing enough to protect the environment, including air and water quality? And what changes, if any, would you like to see?
So one of the biggest problems right now that a lot of constituents have talked to me about is the lead pipes. I think that this is such an immediate issue that families are struggling with. And I think that we need to make sure that all communities have access to clean drinking water. I think that when it comes to our environment, there are things that are happening at the federal level that have in the past 4 years here, we've seen how federal regulations have weakened in regards to our environment. And here in the state of Illinois, we as legislators have said, not in Illinois. In Illinois, we are going to be friendly to our environment. We are going to care for our environment because we know what the ramifications are if we continue to look the other way and ignore science. We here in Illinois stand for a clean environment, for a healthy environment, for our future generations to be able to grow and be healthy in. And so I do believe that there's much left to do here in our state in regards to our environment.
Thank you. Ms. Villa, if the fair tax amendment referendum does not pass, what other options does Illinois have to deal with the budget deficit and pension funding? Which options would you support?
So there was something that under the previous administration, when it came to the funding formula for the schools, there was something called hold harmless. So there are school districts in Illinois that are spending over $20,000 a year per student to educate them. So it was called hold harmless because they continue to receive the same amount of money per year per pupil, where the underfunded school districts were going to start seeing an increase year after year. So if we are unable to pass this legislation, I continue to be committed to making sure that those underfunded schools are top priority. So I think that would open the door. You know, communities like the second largest school district in our state, which is U46, right? U46, as well as the community in which I live in, which is West Chicago, School District 33, School District 94. These communities really are struggling. And the schools in West Chicago don't even have air conditioning. Some classrooms, at sometimes prior to COVID, we had up to 30 kids in a classroom. This is unbelievable. And it's also, all of this is tied into our property taxes. So I think that we are going to have to take a long, hard look at how we can fix and allocate those funds if fair tax doesn't pass.
Thank you. Ms. Ward, same question. If the fair tax amendment does not pass, what other options does Illinois have to deal with budget deficits and pension funding?
Well, as I've said previously, pension reform is the #1 fiscal necessity because it consumes 1/4 of the budget. So we need to really look at pension reform. As I said, we shouldn't be allowing people to double and triple dip. You know, there are people who have put in a certain amount into their pensions and they make it up within 2 or 3 years. I want to be able to keep promises to all the pension holders. So therefore, pension reform is really necessary. Double and triple dipping needs to stop, and we need to take a look. Both sides of the aisle need to take a look at pension reform so that we can keep our promises and so that we can reduce that thing that consumes a 1/4 of the budget. Corruption is a stealth tax in Illinois and an increased costs everywhere. You know, when you have companies paying to bribe public officials, that increases everyone's cost. And in no way do I support increasing taxes. We need to reduce them. If we reduce taxes, that will increase revenue. And that is one of the best ways to keep people in Illinois.
Thank you. Ms. Ward, the last question goes first to you. In your opinion, what is one issue that deserves more discussion and coverage than it's getting? This is an open question, have at it.
To unmute myself. So I think, you know, we're getting discussion on some of these issues, but no action. You know, pension reform, not happening really. Fair maps, it's not happening really. Corruption reform, it's not happening really. So we talk and talk and talk about those things, but they don't actually happen. So I want to see those three things addressed, not just talked about.
Thank you. Ms. Via, same question.
Can you oh, sorry, go ahead.
I'm just gonna say, what is one issue that deserves more discussion and coverage than it's getting?
Okay, so my answer for this one is deeply personal. I spent 15 years working with some of the most complicated students when it was either related to some sort of pre-existing condition or emotional concern, severe behavioral concerns. These students, I always worked so hard with them, and my vision was always that one day, you know, they were going to be adults and everything was going to be wonderful for them because all of the work that we had done with them in elementary and middle and high school, they were going to end up becoming, you know, I just had this vision that things were all going to work out. Things are not working out. Things are not working out for our people who are born with different abilities. It is gut-wrenching, the stories that I have heard about my former students who are now adults and the lives that they're living. It is heartbreaking to hear tales from my constituents about their children who are now adults living with autism, adults living with, you know, any kind of ailment. We can and we must do better for this community. That is a community that I think that deserves much more attention than what they're receiving.
Thank you. Thank you both for answering our questions. At this time, we're going to move to your 2-minute closing statements, beginning with Ms. Ward.
Thank you. And thank you again to the League of Women Voters for hosting this forum. It was very well run and fairly run, and I thank you for that. I'm Jeanette Ward. I'm running to protect freedom, faith, and family in Illinois. Freedom means we need ethics reform, we need swifter justice with long sentences, we need fair maps, and the speaker should not also be his party's chairman. My opponent took $1.4 million in campaign contributions from Michael Madigan, and that is an issue that really needs to be addressed. The Illinois governor has been hostile to the faith community. Again, churches should not have been forced to close while abortion clinics, marijuana dispensaries, and grocery stores were allowed to remain open. The people's legislature should have convened to talk about that, and that is something that I will support if I'm elected. And finally, and first and foremost, families are being crushed by taxes in Illinois. It is the #1 Illinois problem. I want to see that addressed because I love Illinois and I want Illinois to be the powerhouse and to prosper like it could. We need to promote a culture of life in Illinois. We need to protect families by defending and not defunding the police. So I'm looking forward to becoming your next Illinois State Senator in the 25th District. I'm Jeanette Ward. I'm running to protect freedom, faith, and family. The people of Illinois will win with Ward when they vote Jeanette for Senate.
Thank you. Ms. Villa, your closing statement, please.
Thank you. So when I was elected and became the state representative in the 49th district, nobody handed me a book to tell me how to do my job. I immediately got to work though and created an office environment in which I am so proud of today. What we did is we started having advisory committees. We have 6 advisory committees that are regularly attended, in which professionals, constituents, families in our district come to these meetings and they talk to me about the needs, the concerns that are happening throughout the 49th district. Through those advisory committees, it was our senior advisory, mental health, education, we have environment, youth, and small business. Because of the work that I did in establishing those committees, when COVID hit, my office was so prepared. We were ready to work and we were ready to reach out and to bring information, relevant, timely information to my constituents through these connections that we had built. We have people that come into my office, who have come into my office on a regular basis to talk to me about their needs. These people have come to the table from both sides of the aisle. I have been so proud of the work that I have done to unite the people of the 49th district, to serve the people of the 49th district. First and foremost, I will always be a social worker. I will always have an open door for the people who come and want to talk to me, even if we don't agree. I am here for my constituents. I am a full-time legislator. I work hard. I work harder than I have ever worked because I love this job and I will love being your state senator in the 25th district. Thank you.
Thank you both for participating in this candidate forum and giving the voters a chance to hear your views. For more information on these and other candidates, check the voter guide and our LWVEA website, lwvelginarea.org. That concludes today's forum. I want to thank Karina Villa and Jeanette Ward for agreeing to participate. And I want to thank the League members who worked to provide this virtual forum to the voters. Thanks also to the voters who take the time to watch these forums and learn about the candidates in order to make an informed choice. If you have applied for a vote by mail ballot, they will be mailed out beginning September 24th. Voting early in person at specified early voting sites begins on October 19th, and voting on election day at your regular polling place will be, of course, on November 3rd. If you plan to vote early, Please note that different sites are open different hours and there may be changes this year due to the COVID-19 pandemic. You can check the Kane County Elections website for any updates. We hope that this candidate forum presented as a public service by the League of Women Voters has been helpful. If you are interested in joining the Elgin Area League of Women Voters or supporting the work that we do, please contact us at our website. League membership is open to men as well as to women, and we welcome anyone interested in issues, voter registration, and elections. Thank you and good night.